Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Ann Lentino. I am a senior product owner with Sandstorm Design, and I'm joined by my colleague, Madeline Jensen.
Hi, I'm Madeline, development team lead at Sandstorm. Anne and I are both here together because, with as you'll learn, Schema.org and a lot of these AI initiatives really have the best results when you have when you have your technical team and your strategic team working together. So together we are a pair, and we're excited to share what we've learned so far about Schema.org.
Excellent. Thanks, Madeline. And we're also joined by Alma Meshes, host extraordinaire.
Hello.
So she's going to be posting some helpful links in our chat. She'll also be monitoring the chat for any questions that may come up. So please feel free to drop those in there. Alma will be taking a look at them. And then if we have time at the end of our session today, we will try to answer as many as possible. Otherwise, we can reach out and try to answer as many asynchronously as we can. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. Let's go ahead and dive in. So, just to start, a few fun facts about Sandstorm. We've been around for over 25 years. We work primarily with clients in the association, nonprofit, higher ed, and healthcare spaces. And we build enterprise sized websites in Drupal, WordPress, and Sitefinity. As we're going through today, we're going to be looking at some examples from some Drupal sites that we've built, but just know that as we're talking through some of these implementation practices, a lot of these are platform agnostic. So just keep that in mind as we're going through and looking at some of those examples. So here's what we're going to cover today. So we're going to start with a brief overview of what Schema and schema.org, the platform, are. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we use Schema to help inform search engines and different AI systems. And then we'll also talk about content strategy to sort of help map to those schemas and looking at implementing Schema on your website, and then how we test, validate, and iterate on that going forward. So first and foremost, what is Schema? The burning question. So Schema is an outline of categories that are being used to kind of standardize how we are categorizing content on websites across the internet. It's a way for us to translate content on a website so that it is easily digestible by LLMs and different AI bots that are crawling the site, and gives it a little bit more context, particularly for structured content. So it's just sort of a level setting vocabulary that we can start to use across web properties as a whole, and adding that context beyond just the words on the page. So when we dive into a particular schema type, so a pretty ubiquitous one is a web page, which is housed under the kind of creative work category. If you dive in, you'll start to see these different references and what we sort of think of as fields. So, for instance, on a web page, you might find a breadcrumb. You might want to look at when the page was last reviewed. We have an entry here for main content of page, primary image of page. These are all things that the powers that be have kind of agreed on are things that one would expect on a web page. Does that mean that you have to like have every single one of these? No, but it is helpful when you are thinking about structured content to have this kind of map of what might be expected on sort of a generic web page. So when we talk about schema, we have to be a little careful because using schema in the background is not a replacement for strong content strategy that humans are going to read. I equate this in my brain to I studied Shakespeare in college, and our teachers always used to say, if you don't know the words that are coming out of your mouth, the audience isn't going to understand the words that are coming out of your mouth. So if you don't have a strong content strategy for human readable things, bots aren't going to understand it either. Um, but what we want to hear is that it doesn't mean that you have to rebuild from scratch. It doesn't mean that you have to start your content strategy from scratch. The great thing about this is you can map this schema to a lot of the fields and a lot of the values that you already have there. And that's what we want to take a little bit of a look at today. So again, you're already on the right path. You've already been writing content for the website to drive traffic there. Now we're just using this extra tool to help increase your visibility for the bots. So we want to talk a little bit about how we use schema with existing content. So the first place we like to start is just look at your existing content types or templates, or however you're sort of structuring the various types that you're building out in your admin. So we think of like a basic page, we think about individual events, and pull out the ones that have really clear structured content. So fields that you're filling out every time you create a new page or a new article or a new post. Focusing on the pages that really are sort of the highest value, the ones that you really want to elevate as much as possible as your starting place. And then we can think about ways to enrich those, build upon what you have already, and see if there are opportunities as you're looking through that list of values in a particular schema to see if there are other values that you can tie into to help the bots understand what other context is around that page. And it also gives you an opportunity to clean house a little bit. This is as we say at Sandstorm, it's a little bit of a twofer. So going through the content that you have and making sure that it's a good representation of the content that you're trying to convey or the message that you're trying to convey to your audience, but knowing that there's not always a one-to-one relationship. You might want to be using multiple schemas within a page. So if you have a web page, but then you also have an accordion of FAQs on that page, we might want that particular page to be able to tie into both of those schemas, because FAQs in particular are a thing that we've learned that LLMs and AI bots really are attracted to. So focusing also on relationships between content pieces, so overview page and basic page, or related articles, if we're doing something like a blog, are a really great thing to sort of tap into here to help not create those dead ends for LLMs, just the way we do for a regular human user. And then making sure that as we're going through that content, we're really focusing on being concise and clear, which is something that, we've been preaching for a long time, not only from a user experience perspective, but an accessibility perspective. So what's good for humans is also what's good for bots as we try and pare down and really make sure that our content is concise. I'm going to hand it over to Madeline now to talk about the technical side.
Yay. And I'm gonna just sneak peek into the technical part. I don't want to go too deep, but the purpose of this is, okay, now we know we need to clean up our content. So like how do we implement this? Like what is the first step to make this real? And just from the technical side, in this case it's handed off to me, but just to say step one, it's still before you even think about the code, the technical, you still want to have good content, because you're going to make, at the end of this activity, the LLMs are going to find your content better So we want it to be good. So that really comes back to writing good content. So I just want to, what I tell a lot of content editors is once this is wired, once this is good to go and implemented in the back end, it's business as usual, other than making some decisions maybe on what schema.org type you might want to choose for a given page. But beyond that, the most powerful thing that you can do as an editor is ensuring that you're filling out as many juicy fields that are available to you to give that page more semantic meaning. So, for example, one thing, and this has been true since the dawn of SEO, is making sure you have your short description in there. So meta tags are showing, meta descriptions. This is the same principle. Make sure you're filling out your summaries. If there is a taxonomy or classification that can provide um, more details, just the less that the LLM can infer about your page, the more it's, I think, going to better understand what your goals are. So we can move on. I just wanted to make that as a note. So now we can talk a little bit about the technical part here. So again, we still haven't written code yet because we want to have a good plan. This is an example of Anne and I. Exactly. This is what it looks like when a technical lead and a product owner or like a stakeholder, come together and we decide, okay, this is an example for a Drupal site, but again, this could be for really any CMS, is we look at the types of pages we have together. And sometimes it's the developer going in and just giving a list of the content types available on the site, putting that in a ticket and saying, okay, let's share this with the team, with the client. Let's all talk about which ones would be most impactful to start with, what kind of types should they be. We've even had, I think that they are here, but we've had superstar clients and superstar people on Sandstorm too, just that will talk to Chat GPT, find out where the gaps are, and then where those gaps fell short helped us plan our implementation. And for anybody else out there looking on tips to implement, if it feels overwhelming, we found that just starting with as a team, starting with a basic page, being a web page, just to get your feet wet, and rolling it out. Trying a content type and rolling it out. So, all of this to say, again, before you start really worrying about the technical details, as a developer, what you can do in parallel here, or even as a stakeholder, is as you're go to the schema.org documentation, learn about it, so you can kind of understand the syntax and what it's looking for before you write it out.
So it's really
Mm.
helpful not only as a first pass, but also as you're validating. We like to create these kind of these tables so we can say, okay, at a high level, we know that this is the type of the schema type that we're adding this collection page. But within that, sort of like we looked at on the web page where it had the breadcrumb and the main description of page and all that, we're mapping those out one to one with the fields that we already have in that content type, and then looking to see like, oh, is there something that we're missing that would help enrich this in the way that someone might discover this page. So starting with this documentation to get alignment is a great place to start, and as you iterate over time, you kind of know where you are and then can add to it going forward, and then also using it as your testing guide as well.
Cool. All right. So now we're on the same page. We know what we're doing. We have a really good ticket. um, now you're the developer and you start writing code. Now, there are a lot of ways to slice and dice this because there's a lot of content management systems. Um, there's a lot of within each content management system, there's different modules and plugins. We have evaluated them all, and being an agency, we have a lot of clients with different needs. For the clients that have more complex needs, we our development team, we just decided to do custom. At the end of the day, once you iron out the logic, you can kind of see in this screenshot is my code editor. What I usually do is I'll ask Claude, I'll take that table in the ticket, ask Claude to print out, comments so that it's just really easy to keep that, field mapping. I will say the I would say personally the most difficult part as a developer about schema.org is just making sure you're getting the syntax correct. Just make sure you're going to their website, learning their documentation, ask Claude, ChatGPT, anything, whatever you need to do to make sure that the syntax is correct. There's just little nuances between, like a web page might have title as the schema.org attribute, and events might have like headline or name. So you'll see little nuances between the types. So you'll want to validate that you've gotten that correctly. It's all, images might be an object. So beyond that, it really is just, writing PHP that says, I'm gonna here, if you don't mind going to the next one, I can show you. Oh, nope, we didn't do did we show the code sample? Anyways, we'll start with this example because I think that will help kind of show how this evolves. So, like we mentioned, if you're feeling overwhelmed, I really feel like a basic page, if you really want to get started, I would say it's safe to say everything is a web page. If you want to show up in the Google results as a web page and really get lifted and understood and show up in those FAQs or, anything like that, just at least getting. Now, if you don't have the best content, I would still make sure you're cleaning up your content house. But once you feel confident with that, a very good first step is to say basic page is a web page. From there, this is where yep, this is perfect. So then if you want to go more advanced beyond that, this is an example of us. This is a good example of where we were using the schema.org blueprints module. We were using some other schema.org like plugins and modules, and ultimately found out that our editors that we work with, they don't want to have too many choices, but they do want to have a choice. We kind of worked this out as a team together. We didn't want it to be too overwhelming where there's too many choices, but at the same time, there might be a situation where a basic page is a web page, but it might be an FAQ page where it has that structured Q&A, and we really, really do want that to show up as the answer, in those new Google, FAQ things that they do now. We might want that, we might not. So, and again, it might be an about page. So this is an example of in Drupal, but again, you could theoretically do this in any CMS, is adding a drop-down field of approved types. And then this is what drives the logic in the code in the back end that says, if they choose web page, render it as web page schema. If it is about page, render as about page. So you're really just doing conditional logic in the code. Ultimately, this is what we are writing the code to render this. So we are taking the fields that the editor is just doing what they're normally doing, and we're going in the back end writing the code that says, like I said, if they chose about page, the type will be about page. So it's going to render, and that's where you'll want to pay attention to some of the nuances. Is if they do change the type, you might have to show a different field, right? Like you might have to render FAQ things. So just that's where in one of the previous slides, just having that kind of reference of what maps to what so you don't lose track. Hopefully that makes sense. So this is what it should look like. We'll talk a little bit more about how you can validate it, but this is, so once it goes live, you've entered in your content, you right click on a page, and depending on your browser, you can do view HTML or view source. You should see this rendering is what that success looks like there. Okay, cool. So events, that's where, okay, we've done basic pages, we kind of got our feet wet. Events can be a little bit more complex, or they can be straightforward. We have we have clients that have very simple events, and it's just a conference event, or it's an event. It's an event. But we have some clients that might have a conference, they might have a webinar, they have all kinds of different formats to attend events. So this is where spending the time, schema.org/event, you will see all the subtypes. And what I would recommend is, if you're not sure what to choose, um, just pick event. But if you know you're a conference and you know you have a conference, and you're going to choose conference. And just for fun, you can do even cool things like food event and dance event. You could just get, I mean, not that our typical clients have those things, but that just kind of shows, if you check out that documentation, you'll see a long list of different event types. So that's kind of going back to this table and this screenshot is what, if you're going forward with this implementation, you're going to be looking at the schema.org. This is like your life is looking at the page. What can I use from this website that's like most meaningful to my content and gonna have the most impact, I think, is your goal there. And then next, same as usual. So this is a screenshot of a Drupal admin for one of our clients. This is where they can go and, like we talked about, I think this can be kind of confusing to convey sometimes. But a lot of the schema.org work is going to use your existing content, like your node title, your description, your body. But as you're evaluating this, you might find that you need to add new fields just for schema.org. For example, in this situation, event attendance mode, our client is never going to use that field for anything else. It's not, it's just, so you will find little things like that. What we try to do to make this easier is, in this screenshot, for example, we've given it a section, schema.org supplemental fields. The goal there is just to kind of signal, like, this is just for schema.org. And again, as you're developing this, remembering that certain types have required fields or you will get errors. So, example, an event, start date, important, or it will give you an error. What I found on a lot of client sites is we have a date field that is more for display purposes and like a hero display. And we've had to implement new fields that have a date time field that is appropriate for schema.org. So that's kind of where the planning comes in, is what new fields do I need to add? Which ones can I use that already exist? So that's an example of kind of a more complex implementation for that.
Yeah. So basically leveraging what's already displaying on the site, but you may need to add some hidden to an end user fields in order to satisfy some of these requirements.
And
So
then this
here,
is, oh, yeah, go ahead.
go ahead, Madeline.
Yeah, this is an example of it rendering. So what Anne was saying before is just to kind of show, this is where they've chosen conference event specifically for this event type. And you can see, and just to point out really, again, the image, you see how that's an image object. So you'll get an error. If you just pass that node string, you'll get an error. So you'll want to, in your development, pass the proper syntax so it renders like that. And then this has part. This is the juicy stuff that Anne was mentioning. LLMs and it's just right now the game seems to be, how can you get into that AI summary, answering questions, and your source comes up. What we're finding is FAQ is part of that. So there's a few ways to slice and dice this, but ultimately, if you want to do FAQs, you must have a structured answer and question set. So what we've done, what we found is most of our clients already have an accordion component. Just everybody has one where you have a title, you have and most people do put their FAQs in our experience in those blocks anyways. So what we did is, and as a just a little note for developers, sometimes you might have to do some extra logic to dig into layout builder or a block on a page, but you can do this through, node entity relationships. But the idea is, um, then you can do this a lot of ways. This is just one of the ways, is if somebody puts a FAQ, somebody puts an accordion on a page, and we gave a checkbox that says, make this schema FAQ, so just normal accordion, then it can generate this has part. And then it can be considered also FAQ. So this is an additional schema. So the has part is important because we're saying the main entity is this event, but it also does have FAQ. So just a side note, you can also choose to say, I have an entire main FAQ page. So there's a lot of ways to slice this, but this is what it kind of looks like. Again, right click, view source, look at that, see it rendering. You can put that through the schema.org validator, see if it doesn't have any issues.
So how do we tell that this is working, right? As Madeline mentioned, you can validate your schema implementation. There is a tool attached to schema.org that you can use for this. I went backwards. But also just doing that right click and making sure that you're seeing those fields that you mapped out is a really easy way to sort of get that dopamine hit of when you first implement it. But also act like a bot and see what shows up. And then you can continue to refine as you go along and as you're seeing any potential changes or opportunities or maybe some additional gaps. So again, the validator that we talked about, we want to make sure that your structured data matches the actual visible content on the page, and then continue to monitor those search results and the AI generated responses over time. Another thing that we like to try is pretend you're new. Go to ChatGPT or Claude or your favorite LLM and say, what does this organization do? What is this organization about? And if you do that prior to embarking on this journey and afterwards, you can observe the change of what results come back and how much the schema implementation is helping you. And then again, if you identify other gaps where you're saying, oh, we want to make sure that we're leveraging associated speakers for a particular event, that's something that you can also add on in time. But this is definitely a sort of step-by-step process, and you can continue to iterate on it. So takeaways for today. Schema is an aid for the content that you already have to help LLMs better understand the content that you're already putting out into the world. Start with what you already have, and you don't always have to create something new. That's what's great about using this mapping to the structured content. And to get the best bang for your buck, as it were, make sure that you prioritize the high value content that you really want to be driving people to first and foremost. And then you can continue to validate, test it, iterate on it over time to keep improving your discoverability and visibility in those AI and other search results as well. So thank you all for being here today. I know we only have 1 minute left. These are a couple blogs. I know some, we have them in the chat as well. But any pressing questions before we jump off
We
today?
did have one question, which I hope we can get to before we jump off. So when you were describing step number 2, as part of the implementation, we had a question about, does using a modular layout like Site Studio components affect the quality of schema mapping?
I don't think it will. I do think it will add some extra thoughtfulness and planning for your developer, or if you are the developer, you'll want to make sure Like I mentioned earlier, we have some with layout builder with the block and layout builder on the page. Um, and yeah, it it's you have to be able to dig into that relationship on the node and say, what's in this, array, like what can I find? So it can get complicated, but it won't affect the quality of the schema, if that answers your question. As long as you're rendering it on the page in the HTML, it'll pick it up.
All
Hopefully
right.
that answers the question. I know it's hard.
Thank you. Yes, we got to thank you for that. One more quick sneaky question before we're out of time here. Can a page have multiple content types?
So there's always going to be a primary one, but like we saw in that FAQ example, there you can add a has part to add additional. So in the beginning, I had mentioned like it might not be a one-to-one, it might be a one-to-many. So you might have a default that just generates on that particular template, but then like with an FAQ, we might attach that schema to a block that's placed on the page, and that is a great way to add sort of additional context without changing sort of the main purpose of what that page is doing and the content on that page. All right, we're a minute over, so I think we have to hop. But is
Yeah.
there anything else before we jump?
No, I think that was all the questions that we had in there for the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for being here today. Appreciate your time and good luck to everyone on your schema journey.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.